Good morning everyone. Where's everyone watching from? I need to grab my water. All right, finally got my water. How's everyone doing this morning? North Carolina, lots of North Carolina today. I'm just finishing getting set up. Oregon, Mexico, nice. I'm trying to get my second device so I can see the comments better. Columbia, welcome, welcome, Illinois. So I'm gonna need a couple, some help figuring out a couple variables. Today we're gonna be painting a bunch of little landscapes, and what I want to do is work from a limited palette. So we're just going to mix up a couple colors, and then we're going to see all the different variations we can make by making these little mountain or little landscape type things. So I want to know, do you want me to work with tube paints today or pan paints is the first question. If you're going to participate today too, you're either going to want a little sketchbook that you're going to tape off little pieces in, or I've cut a bunch of pieces of Canson XL paper into different sizes. All right, it looks like pan paints are going to win. And then let's choose only 5 colors we're going to work with today. Because what we're going to do is, I'm going to actually clean these out because I wanted to show you that when we work with just a couple colors, we can make a ton of stuff. I'm going to clean these out. We got purple, yellow, blue. Anybody else have any votes for the colors? I should have wiped all this out before I got started, before I went live, but hey, we're doing it on the fly. Okay, we got sepia, neutral, black. Sienna. We got red and green. Blue, earth colors. All right, so I'm gonna kind of look, all right, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna take out the colors we're gonna be using today. So what I wanna do is, we're gonna do a blue. I think I'm gonna do this blue. This is blue raspberry in my palette. Ooh, these are real messy, but I'm gonna, or maybe actually what I'll do is I'll tape off the ones we're not using. That's what I'm gonna do so that I can limit the colors. We had a red and we have a pink, so we'll pick a red or a pink. So I'm not going to use this one. Taping it off. And you know what? We're going to be able to mix colors. So since somebody did say red, let's go with this red, and then we'll cover up the purple because we can always mix a purple. We're going for about 5. Somebody said yellow. So we're going to do, let's do this yellow here. So we have 3. And then, you know what? We're going to stick with just 4. Let's do this sepia color over here. So there's kind of, well, I don't know if it's a sepia. It's kind of like a sienna color here. So the colors I'm going to basically be using today are a magenta type red. This looks so funny like this. But we've got a phthalo type blue, a magenta type red, a medium yellow, and then we're going to do something that's kind of similar to a burnt sienna. Now this doesn't mean these are the only colors we're going to be able to use, because this actually does leave us open to a ton of mixing options. We can do oranges, we can do blues, we can do purples, and we can do kind of everything in between with these 4 colors. So what we're going to be doing today, if you want to follow along, is we're just going to be painting as many of these little landscapes as we can in 60 minutes. So what we're going to be doing is taping down. I'm going to start, I've got something, this is like an MDF board that I saved from other projects and other failed projects. You can see I painted over it. And we're going to just tape down a bunch of these. I don't know if I'll get all of these done, but these are little 3x3. I took a piece of Canson XL paper and I have cut it into 3x3s and 3x4s, and then this is a little like 2x3, and we're gonna be painting on all of these. So I'm gonna tape these down. We're going to see how many of these that we can paint using just those colors and getting a whole bunch of variations. So I'm going to start by taping these down. If you want to follow along, you're going to want to do something kind of similar. And this way we're going to be able to cover a whole bunch of different topics. It is World Watercolor Month. And so we're going to be able to learn a bunch of stuff using these little landscapes to talk about color mixing. We're going to be talking about different techniques. We're just going to be having lots of fun today. Are there any landscape elements that you guys specifically want to see today? Like, do you want to see the clouds demonstrated? Do you want to see a sunset? What are you kind of hoping for today? Oh, and yes, I was able to get both last week's and the peony downloaded, and I uploaded them to my YouTube yesterday. So if you were wanting to see those replays, because for a while, for some reason, TikTok was being a little goofy with letting me download stuff, but they are up now. So if you need to see the replay, if you were not able to see, for those of you who don't know, by the way, my name's Lacey. I'm the artist behind Rebel Unicorn Crafts, and we do these lives every other week together where we paint. It allows me to show you something either that we've been working on or just something that I want to share with you guys in real time without being constrained by the limit of, you know, like a minute. And we just have fun together. So, and then when we are done with the class, as long as TikTok lets me, I upload it to my YouTube so that I know people have lives. I know you might be working or doing something else on a Saturday, and that allows you to do it at your leisure. Stormy clouds, that can be fun. A desert, maybe. I love the idea of the desert. I wonder, do I have any ideas for that? We'll have to see. All right, so I'm taping down 6 pieces of paper here. And the tape I'm using is, I literally just found the cheapest masking tape that I could because I go through a lot of it, and so that's what I'm using today. A lot of times I use washi tape in my notebooks because it does help me get these nice crisp lines for these borders. And washi tape is really gentle on your paper, so it runs a lower chance of ripping your paper. but it doesn't always stick things down very well like this. So I find that cheap masking tape is kind of that nice middle ground of like it being stickier than washi tape. So we're doing landscapes today. Finnish forest sounds magical, but I don't know if I know exactly what that looks like. Okay. But we can do something foresty for sure. A creek or a path? Let's see. Waterfall I will not be tackling today. For some reason, me and waterfalls and painting them, they just never turn out for me. I would love to be able to teach that, but I feel like that's not my thing, I guess. All right. So what we'll do is we're going to start by mixing up some colors. I've got a couple different suggestions. Creek to lake. Ooh, I wonder if we have enough much to put here. All right, so I'm going to set this to the side for just a minute because we're going to mix up some colors. We have stormy clouds as our first one. So let's actually start by mixing up kind of a stormy color. So what I'm going to do is, again, if you're just joining, we're working with a really limited color palette. So I've blocked off all the colors I won't be using today. So I'm using this phthalo type blue. This is a kind of a magenta. This is a medium yellow, and that is a kind of a burnt sienna or something, kind of a color similar to that. And today I'm going to be painting with my size 12 round brush. I could use a quill brush for this, and I'm currently having a major love affair with quill brushes, but we're going to try. I'm going to go back to my 12 brush because I do love it as well. Does my tray need to be more clean? Technically, it could be a little more clean, although there's a little bit of color in here, but not too much, and so it's not going, especially since that is already kind of a blue color, it's not going to affect it that much, but some of this is just kind of colored the tray a bit, so it's going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine. All right, I also am going to grab a little extra strip of paper here. This is a tester strip, because it's going to help me understand the colors I'm mixing up. I'm going to start with this blue. And for a stormy color, we want this to be kind of a gray blue. So, you know, if we were here, we're still in kind of a light but bright blue. I want it to be a little darker in general, more saturated with the actual color. So I'm going to mix in a little more. That's about the saturation level that I'm looking for as far as water to color ratio. But this isn't so much stormy. This is more like a bright day with some scattered clouds. So what I actually need to do to mix a stormy color is I need to take the color that's on the opposite side of the color wheel. And that is actually orange. So I need to mix an orange because I don't technically have one, but I also do because of the colors we're using. We could probably also get away with using this brown to do the same thing. Which one do I want to do? I think I'm going to do grabbing this kind of magenta color, putting a little bit there, because I'm going to mix up a little bit of an orange, because I don't need a ton. Taking some of this yellow, and let's mix that in till we've got a bit of orange. Then I'm going to actually take my brush and just kind of tap it off to the side so I don't have a ton in there. I still have quite a bit in my brush, and I'm going to mix it into this. I'm going to just take little swipes of this at a time, because what I'm doing is I'm muting this color down a bit. Take a little more. We can always go back in and add more of that blue if we need to. I think I'm also going to need a little more pink because I think my orange was a little too yellow orange, so it's going a little bit more towards the teal side, which could be really pretty, but I think I just want it to be a little bit calmer, so I'm going to take a little bit more of that pink and mix that in. Notice how I'm just kind of swatching as I go. Oops, I didn't have that mixed very well. There we go. That's much more like a stormy blue to me. So this is going to be our first one we're going to do. So we're going to do clouds, but we're going to, which I actually did a video on the other day, but we're going to take a slight variation on this to make them more stormy. Okay, so that's going to be my first one up here. We're going to be painting all the skies first, and then we're going to go in and we're going to add in our other details. For the stormy one, just to start off, we're just going to put this all down the page, and we're going to plan to put mountains over it kind of like this, and then we'll get a little more creative with our variables as we go on. Yes, so what we're going to be doing is I'm taking my brush. I'm going to need this to apply the paint, and then we're going to be lifting out the clouds. So what I like to do is take a paper towel and I scrunch it up, and then I tear it. And this natural edge, both sides of this natural edge, are what's going to give us the fun cloud shapes that we're going to be able to lift off. So the first technique we're going to be learning today is called a flat wash, and we're going to be using the drip line effect, or drip line technique. So we're going to take our board. That's why you would usually want to actually tape your stuff down, not to the table, but to something you can move around, because we want to use gravity as our friend. So I'm going to be holding this at an angle. This is at about a 30 to 45 degree angle. And I'm going to fill up my brush with a bunch of that blue color we just mixed up. And there's a bunch in my brush, and I'm going to make one stripe across the page. Notice, because I'm holding it at an angle, it creates a drip line. Then I'm going to refill my brush, pull it down, refill my brush, pull it down, and this is just going to give us a slightly more even wash. It does look like I touched around the edges of this paper quite a bit, so we're going to get some variation here, but that's okay. I'm using Canson XL, which is not a super nice paper, but it's a great practice paper. At the very bottom, I'm going to dry my brush off, tapping on a paper towel. I'm going to suck up this extra right here. Then quickly, before this dries, it's okay if there's a little variation. We're going to be painting some stuff in the foreground. I'm going to take my natural paper towel, the edge of it, and press and lift. It's going to give us our clouds. Now here's where the stormy part's going to happen. If I take a fresh part of that and I pull down lightly, I can make it look like a little rain burst. Now I kind of wish that my blue was a little bit darker, because I'm not getting a ton of variation or contrast between these. So what I'm actually going to do is, let's do this one again, except for we're going to plan to have this have a slight variable, and I'm going to darken my blue color for this next one. This next one we're only going to paint to about 2/3 of the way down. So we're going to be doing kind of the same thing, but we're going to be changing a variable. And the first thing though is I want to change that blue because I want there to be more contrast. We might even come back to this one and do a second layer to kind of try to correct and make it a little bit stormier, but we'll see. All right, so I need to make my blue darker to start with. So into this same color, I'm going to add in more blue. I'm trying not to add in more water. And we're going to add in, actually, I am going to modify it this time using this brown or burnt sienna type color, and let's see what happens. It's a little bit darker, and that brown has some yellow undertones and some green undertones, so I am going to grab some of this kind of orangey red that we mixed up to kind of try to counteract that. And there. Hopefully that one is a little bit more saturated, so we're going to get more contrast, but this could be a nice stormy blue color. Alright, so we're going to do a second try of this. We're going to start in the same manner, but instead I'm going to stop it about here because we're going to plan to put something in the foreground here. I haven't entirely decided what we're going to put in the foreground, but I want to plan for the fact that I don't want the sky to go all the way down to the bottom. Alright, so I filled up my brush, Oh, before I start, let's actually tear off the edges of these so that we've got fresh, non-saturated pieces of this paper towel. You don't need to tear very much off. Filling up my brush, I'm holding this at an angle. We're going to put this across. Now, since I did seem to touch the areas around this with my fingers, which is part of why it's kind of pulling away from the edges here, I'm going to kind of spend a second to actually scrub a little bit at the top just to try to remove some of those oils. Then I'm going to refill my brush and pull it down. Refill my brush, pull it down. Refill my brush, pull it down. And then on that last swipe, pull it down, dry my brush, and then suck up the extra water here. Again, I'm going to take this, my rough edge, press and lift. Rotate, press and lift. And if I want to, I can kind of lightly drag down to create some of those little bursts. Okay, that one looks way stormier for me. Before I move on though, I'm not going to mess with that up part anymore, but I do want to take off a little more of that kind of standing color at the bottom. So see, we had one where it was a little bit too light, not super crazy about this one. This one I feel like has more potential, so we will probably revisit this one in another layer to kind of mess with it. We could even try to do a night sky on the top of this one, just because it is yeah, this one's better, at least in my opinion. You might have a different opinion, and that's totally fine. Yeah, so the goal of today's class is to show you how with a few variables, our first set of variables is that we're only using 4 colors to mix all of our colors together. And then the other thing that we're going to be playing around with is we're looking at landscape elements and how to kind of see how by changing a couple little variables, like bringing it all the way down or stopping it about here, we're going to be able to do a whole bunch of different things. So we don't need a whole brand new idea. We just kind of need to modify a couple little variables. So somebody did say a desert, and I'm a little concerned about doing that one because I feel like I don't have a ton of ideas, but I think I might be able to come up with something maybe as we go. And so I'm kind of thinking like a reddish, pinkish, orange type sky, like a real vivid sunset. And by doing that first, I'm going to give myself the chance to kind of let that percolate, and maybe I'll be able to build some things in. So to prepare, I'm going to make sure that my colors are wetted. I'm also going to grab a little bit of this pink so that I have a decent amount of this color, but in a more predictable manner. A lot of times I will take some of the color and tap it off on one side so that when I go to grab the color, I know a little bit better how much I'm actually getting than when I stick my brush in here, because I might be picking up just huge amounts of that pigment, and it could be really surprising. Washing my brush, and I'm going to do the same with the yellow. The other thing is I'm not super careful about this normally, and so you can see my colors have kind of combined together. But at the same time, this will help reduce the amount of like red that you get into your yellow or vice versa by grabbing these and kind of tapping them off to the side. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to wash our brush really well. And then we're going to grab a bunch of water in our brush, and we're going to put this over the entire thing. We're going to be doing a wet on wet technique here to make this sunset. So I'm just going to scribble this all around the page, let it pre-wet. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to evaluate how wet it is by holding this up to the light source and looking for the reflection. See how we can see the reflection there? Just for learning's sake, I'm going to add some more water. Okay, notice that when I put it right over here, you can see how it's super duper glassy. But over here, we can see some of the texture of the paper. The wetter your page is, so it's wetter on this side, the less control you're going to have, and then the less glassy it is, the more control you're going to have, or the more it's going to basically stay there. I usually like it to look kind of like over here before I start adding in my wet colors, because over here, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this water just moves around. So I'm going to just kind of redistribute this throughout to try to get it kind of at least an even level of wetness. See, there we go. It's pretty even across. All right, so now we've got our colors here. So I'm just going to let's grab some of this. And let's just put that along the top. Maybe a little of this yellow. This part, just do what your heart tells you. Kind of switch between the colors. And we're just going to drop those in that wet area. Just to get some fun colors going. Now I'm going to stop messing with it at this point. If I keep swiping across, I'm going to start to pick up some of the water, some of the pigment, and it's going to kind of create a way where it's going to dry unevenly. So at this point, I'm just going to let it do its thing, other than maybe grab a little bit of the standing water. And then we'll evaluate it once it's settled down a little bit as it dries. So the paints I'm using, these ones are not my handmade ones. These are the ones that I have manufactured. I do have some of my handmade ones that are over here in this palette, but we've blocked all of those off. So these are kind of very typical student grade paints, but I really like how saturated the colors are, and I think they're a really good place to start something like a set like this. Yeah, so I'm going to go back into the comments for just a second before we work on another one. Does your training, do you need to pick warm primary colors or cool ones? I actually did a mixture. This is a warm yellow. This is kind of a pink, which is pretty much a middle warm tone. But this is more of a cool leaning blue. So I do have a mixture. You don't have to, you can. It is going to result in, when we are mixing colors, having a mixed cool and warm tone palette. It's going to make some slightly more muted colors, but that's fine because we're painting landscapes. And, you know, most things in nature are slightly more muted than they are super duper vibrant. Even when they do look really vibrant, a lot of times there's kind of this muted undertone to them because nature is really natural. The nails are not that exciting, and they have, I've been playing with red clay. And you can see my palm is stained from throwing with red clay. And so I feel like my nails are stained around the edges from that. These are just press-on nails. Okay, I'm using Canson XL paper. And we're going to move on to the next one. So this one, let's take the concept of kind of this one minus the clouds and this one, and let's paint something that's kind of in between full-blown sunset and during the day. So we're going to work on a gradient on this one. How many people in the comments have ever painted a gradient with watercolor before? While I'm waiting to hear, also I'd love to know, are you guys way behind? Do you need me to slow down just a little bit, or are we good to keep going? I'm gonna wipe out my palette while I wait for you guys to let me know. We've got quite a few people who've done gradients, a few that haven't. Always watch first and then paint it on replay. You know what's funny is I feel like my instinct is I want to tell you guys like as many things as I possibly can, so I kind of speed through things, but I do know that oftentimes I paint on the faster side of kind of the painting speed spectrum. So yeah, I do try to keep it slow, but I fail at that usually. All right, so we're going to be working on a gradient, and if you were here for the first part where we talked about doing that drip line, you actually already know how to do it. We just need to mix up a second color because we're just going to be changing what we dip our brush into. I'm going to put a little water in here. You can always do this just by dropping water in with your brush, or you can use something like a spray bottle. And let's go. We're going to go from blue to pink. I'm just adding in a little amount at a time just to get a nice pink color. Let's just double check it. Ooh, that is nice and light. Maybe something just a bit more. Just a tiny bit more. There we go. I like that. And we already have this blue over here, but I do feel like this blue is a little bit too saturated for this kind of nice, lovely in-between that I want. So I'm going to take my brush, I just dried it, I'm going to tap it dry, and then I'm going to take a scoop of this darker color over here, and I'm going to put a little water into it to just kind of soften that color up a little bit. Now we've got that. I'm working on a really small piece of paper, so I don't need a ton. This is a 2 by 3 inch piece of paper. What I'm going to do is I need my color, and I also need my clean water right here. The clean water is unfortunately going to have to be off to the side because I can't show all of those things and also do this at the same time. So I'm going to start with the blue in my brush. I'm going to make a stripe across the top, and again, because I did touch these a lot, I am going to do that little scribble at the top to just try to make it so that doesn't happen as much. I'm going to make another stripe with more color in my brush down, and then I'm going to start to dip into some water. So I just dipped my brush into water. I didn't completely clean it off. I'm going to dip into water again because I want to actually lighten this blue before now I'm going to start to dip in to this pink color. This is going to be a really soft color. Dipping into that pink to get that nice transition between that blue and the pink color. I'm going to pull that down into the bottom, dry my brush off. It's a lovely shade of kind of a lavender pink color, and just picking up that extra water. The paint dries lighter. So if at any point we're like, and we're going to actually play around with this on this one, we can always add another layer if we're not in love with one of our backgrounds. I actually really like how this is very kind of light transition. All right, what's our sky inspiration for the next one? Do we want to do another sunset? Do we want it to be more yellows? Ooh, it would be kind of neat to do like just a really bright yellow, maybe a tiny bit of blue at the top, but we have to keep them separated, which is tricky, and I can show that. And then it could be reflecting into a lake over here. Horizon ocean, yes, yeah, that was kind of what I was actually thinking, Mary. So the galaxy, I think we're going to turn this one into the galaxy, just FYI, because I'm not loving this one. African sunsets are bright yellow and orange. That sounds beautiful. Okay, all right, so we're going to be playing with a little bit of fire here, quite literally, since we're going to do a bright sunset. And this is another one we're going to stop painting about 2/3 of the way down for the sky. I will be explaining why we're stopping in some and not in the layers that are to come. But we're going to be going from, we're going to do a little bit of blue at the top, and then we're going to be doing some yellows and oranges down here by the horizon line. Now, this is tricky because we want to be really careful to keep those two colors separated, or we're going to run the risk of these actually kind of blending together and becoming a green color, which is not really what we want in our sunset. So I am going to start kind of risky by pre-wetting the top 2/3 of the page. But I'm going to let it soak in quite a bit so that I can better control where these colors are going to go. So I've got water on here, and let's get that reflection. We're going to wait for a minute. We're going to wait for that to soak in a bit more before we start. So we do have a blue color that we could use here, and that one will work just fine. And then we're going to need to grab this yellow as well. So we're going to let this soak in just a bit more. Notice that it's starting to change a little bit. You can see that it's not reflecting as well, especially on the sides. This is going to give me a little more control. The more I wait, I don't want it to be completely dry. So we're going to have to make a move soon. We're going to start about now. So I've grabbed a little bit of this blue. See the reflection? I'm going to place this at the top, and I'm also going to tilt my brush, or my paper, not my brush, my paper in the opposite direction to make sure it's not flowing. I'm going to wash my brush, and I'm going to put a little water right along the bottom of that, kind of as a barrier. I'm going to re-wet down here just a little bit, just a tiny, tiny bit. And now, with a clean brush, I'm going to grab this yellow, and let's place this right along the edges here. Again, I'm going to wash my brush so I can kind of soften this up a little bit. And let's be a little bit risky, and let's try to do a little bit of some orange here. I'm just trying to grab a tiny, tiny bit of that pink. Now we do need to be a little careful. I got a little more than I meant to. I'm going to wash my brush. We're trying to avoid touching the blue and any of these other colors together, because then we're not going to, if we do that successfully, we're not going to get any of those greens. I feel like we need to put in a little bit more of that yellow into where this orange is, just to give it a little more variation. Okay. I think I'm going to stop there, because if I go any closer, we're going to really run the risk of getting that. Oh, I need to straighten that up just a bit at the bottom. We're going to run the risk of getting that to mix into that blue. All right, so this one, since we're going to do a horizon thing, we can actually take advantage of, we still have a little bit of, or I still have a little bit of this yellow in my brush, and all we're going to be doing to make this kind of a lake view or a ocean view is we're using the white of the paper. It's going to, we want it to be able to see some of the white of the paper through, because it's going to be kind of like the highlights. But what water does at certain degrees and things is it's going to reflect the colors that are around it. So we're just going to basically take all the colors we used in the sky. And so since I already have some yellow in my brush, I'm just going to make these little kind of flicks on the water. I'm going to concentrate most of them up against where this horizon is, because that's where the greatest amount of that yellow is. And then I'm going to bring them out just to kind of reflect it, but it's going to be lighter and less often. You're not going to be able to see it a ton, and especially not on the video, but there are these little flicks of yellow that I'm going to have there. And I'm just going to leave that one there for now. It already does kind of look like a nice little like lake scene. It needs some more layers, but we'll get there. So the board I'm using is an old MDF board, but my favorite boards to actually use is when I finish something like a pad of this Canson XL paper, I save this back piece of cardboard because it's a nice thick piece of cardboard, plus it's also kind of a nice size, and then that's what I use a lot of the time. I accidentally spilled water in a bunch of mine the other day, and so I'm having to use these once again. But that's the best little boards that I actually like to use. Okay, let me look at the comments real quick. You never have the patience to wait for the water to soak with the paper. Yeah, it is tricky. All right, we've got one more to do. What do we want to do on this last one? Do we want to do just a normal blue sky, very even colors? Do you want to do a second galaxy? I am going to be turning, because this one is already kind of dark, I am going to be turning this one into a galaxy one. But let me know what you want to do in this one here. You can blow dry, yes. Northern Lights. Okay. Whoops, I'm kicking my trash can. We got a summer blue sky, blue daylight. Blue daylight might be fun because we can leave and we can do a field down here. Yeah, let's do kind of a bright blue. Okay. So I'm going to modify this color. There's not a ton here. I'm going to put a little more water here. We want this to be a brighter blue. So I'm going to grab. We did a drip line technique earlier. I'm going to show you an alternate. So we've talked about that watercolor dries lighter, so this color is going to become lighter than this as it dries. But the other thing is this is the color when we put it onto dry paper. Now, if I were to pre-wet this area, and then I dry my brush off so that I'm not introducing additional water, but I take this same color that's above, and I put this on here, look that it's lighter. It's much lighter where the water is than where it's not. So we can do that drip line technique to get a nice even wash, but we can also do a wet on wet technique, but we have to account for the fact that since we're adding it to water, it's going to lighten the color. So we need to actually add a little bit more to this. If this is, let's say this is the color you were looking for, you're not going to get that by adding it to water. So we need to add a little bit more, and then we can test and see that's going to actually be closer to the color. So now I have that color here. So we're going to do an alternate for a nice flat wash instead of the drip line. That's the reason why I like the drip line, is that the color we put down is the color we're going to get. But when we add it wet on wet, it's going to be a little bit lighter, so we have to take that into account. So I'm going to wet the top 2/3 of this page really well, trying to make sure that it's evenly wet. Now my paper, because I touched around the sides when I was taping this down, I did deposit some of the oils from my hands, and so it is wanting to kind of pull away from the sides, the water is. So I'm going to take a little extra time to kind of just scrub around the edges, because I do want this to be evenly wet, and I'm getting where it's really drying along the edges, but staying wetter on the sides. Okay. So now let's double check. It's pretty evenly wet, but this is not dripping wet. There is no standing water on this. Then I'm going to grab this color, and I'm just going to place this all throughout. And I'm not going to be super duper perfect about this, because since we're putting it on wet paper, all those lines and stuff are going to soften. We do want to stop touching it about here. It's not going to be as even of a wash as if we did the drip line on this paper specifically. If you did this on a cotton paper, this would be a nice even wash. But on this Canson XL, it's not going to be as even, but I like to demonstrate on this because this is probably the paper that a lot of people are going to be using, especially when they get started, is something that is more budget friendly. Something like arches or Stonehenge are going to be pretty pricey when you get started. And if you're practicing a lot or tossing a lot, that can just add up. And that's why I love doing little things like this where we're painting a bunch of these. This is in essence not even one full sheet of this. So for this practice today, usually a pack of this is like somewhere around $12 depending on what deals and stuff you have, and there's 30 sheets, so we're looking at like 50 cents worth of paper here, maybe not even that, versus if we were doing this with Arches paper, we'd be looking at a couple dollars every time we tried to do something like this. And I am using the same brush throughout. This is a size 12 round brush. All right, so because we worked on a bunch, let's go back and kind of evaluate both what we've painted so far and then also how dry or wet things are. This one is dry. This was our first one. This is the one that did not work super well for me. I didn't have enough contrast, and I also was not accounting for how much oil I personally applied to the paper as I taped these down. So this one I don't love. We're going to do this one as a night sky. Probably not Northern Lights because there are a lot of pink hues in this that I can see, and if I add any green to it, it's going to then kind of turn it more of a brown color, and that would not be really spectacular. Plus, we want to start with white paper for something like Northern Lights. So we're going to be adding this. I like this one. It looks kind of goofy right now, but once we add in our other elements, it's going to really come together. And this might be the one, just so I don't forget, I'm going to just kind of mark in a little bit. This is like a note for me. You don't have to do this part here. But somebody wanted to do kind of a river type thing, so I'm going to make sure I put that in there. So I just kind of am drawing that in so that I know. I'll probably modify this a little bit, but at least this will remind me of what I was going to do. This one is also dry enough for me to move on to additional layers, and this one is almost dry enough, but not quite. Again, this one's probably dry enough, and then these two are definitely too wet. So we're going to work on this one, and by the time we get down to these other ones, they will probably be dry. This is going to differ based on where you are. If you're in a really humid environment, you're probably going to need to actually take a second to dry these. You probably can't wait it out. I live in Colorado, and it's typically pretty dry here. It's been wetter than normal this year, but right now it's pretty dry. So things dry pretty fast for me. Before I start this, one quickly. Does the tape help with the paper not bubbling? Yes. So the tape does a couple things. It keeps it from moving around on you, but it does bubble up a little bit. You can kind of, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but these are bubbled just a bit. And it makes it so that it bubbles in a more predictable manner because it kind of puts like tension around all the corners of this. So for this, what we're going to be doing is mixing up, I like to do kind of like some grays, some blues, and some pinks for my night skies, my little like magical night skies. So let's do that. And we want these to be pretty dark colors. So I usually like to do kind of a neutral gray blue. We have a good base for this in this color here. So let's modify it to get it to be even more gray. This is where we're starting. So I'm going to be using some of this. I want some of that orangey yellow color. And we're going to go a little bit too far to one side here. It's going to be green for a second. Don't worry. We're going to modify it. So I want it to be darker. First, I'm going to grab a little additional pink to bring it more to a neutral kind of gray color. And then we're going to bring it back over to the blue side by grabbing some more blue So we got a nice kind of gray blue color here. Now again, an indigo would be great for this. You might already have a color that is this color. You don't have to mix this color, but we are working with a limited palette, and I just like, this is a way for me to kind of show some color mixing stuff for those of you who are a little bit new to this or confused by it. So I've got my blue. I want a more vibrant pink than what I currently have, so I'm going to grab a little more pink. Just a little bit more. A little more saturated. Maybe one more. There we go. And then I'm going to want some bright blue. Put a little more water in there just so I have enough. And let's grab this color. As you can see, this is my favorite color because I'm almost out of it. I always run out of this color first. I love Phthalo blue. Okay, we got a nice bright blue. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I've got those 3 colors, and I'm just gonna place these down. Maybe washing my brush in between, maybe not. I am gonna wash my brush because I'm gonna put that down to get some of that pink. Then I'm gonna dip into that gray. Maybe a little bit more of that bright blue, more of that gray, maybe a little more pink. And we're just kind of scribbling them around, touching those wet areas to other wet areas. And look at that. We got a nice kind of magical, mystical, if the Northern Lights were pink type galaxy sun or night scene. Okay, so we're gonna let that one do its thing, and we're gonna move on to, we're gonna add some mountains to this one. So what we wanna do is we're gonna do some prep. I should have mixed up larger quantities of these colors, and I'm kind of trying to do this on the fly, but it would be easier if we just had more. I'm gonna rinse out this well because I want 2 wells. We did talk about this in that video that I did yesterday, so if you want, afterwards you're like, why do I watch the replay just for this one piece of information? It is included in that in a shorter format. So I'm going to start by adding in, because we're going to use the same color for all our mountains. So let's mix up quite a bit of this darker color. And I'm going to go for, we're going to do like purple type mountains, but I'm going to start with this blue because we don't have a purple readily available. I taped over the other ones because we're working with a limited color palette today. Now let's bring this a little bit purple. Adding in some of that pink. Gonna need a little more of that pink. Get a little more purple. Running out of space on all my tester strips, I'm gonna have to grab a new one. And then I am gonna mute this color a little bit. There we go, a nice dark purple. By adding in a little tiny bit of yellow. This is something I personally like to do. If you're like, I like the purple how it was, just leave it. But I personally like to make them kind of a steely purple type color. So this is my dark color. I want to preserve this color. But right next to it, I want to put some clean water. I'm going to take the remaining color that's in my brush, mix that in. That's probably not enough to actually make much of anything. So I'm going to dry my brush so that I'm not putting more water back into this one. And I'm going to take another scoop of that purple. Now I've got a nice light color. This one will work. You're an oil painter? Oh my gosh, oil paint is foreign to me. The amount of time you have to wait. So we're going to be adding in some layers of some mountains, and we're going to be doing this based on, so we're going to be adding it to this one, and this one, and this one. Not on this one or this one. We're going to do different types of elements on those that are going to kind of help us complete the painting. So on this one, a lot of times what I like to do is based on where the clouds are, I like to kind of use them to help me kind of decide the shapes of the mountains. Sometimes I go a little off book, but like I love kind of making a little valley there and some peaks and it going down here. I think it'll look really neat. So I'm going to just take that light color we mixed, and I'm going to place this, and I'm going to pull this down to where the sky ends. Now, the reason we painted this one only a third of the way down, oh, my camera, of course, is not focusing at that time. The reason why we painted this one only a third of the way down is we're going to be doing something different in the foreground, and so we don't want all these colors competing, but we also want to make sure that our sky goes behind all these layers so that we don't just have that random like line across, because it is transparent. So that's why we painted the sky down to the bottom of where the mountains are going to be. All right, we're going to take that light color again. And the other thing I want you to notice is because of the transparent nature, even though I'm going to use the same color I used here, on this one it's going to look way different because I'm putting it over different colors. Now this one is meant to kind of be our desert type scene. So rather than doing these kind of pointy mountains, which there are, oops, wrong color. There are some pointy mountains in the desert, but let's make some of these more like mesas. So rather than making pointy mountains, I'm going to make kind of these lines that come down. Maybe there's another little mesa here. And I'm going to pull that all the way down to the bottom. This one's meant to be kind of inspired by a desert, so that's why we're going to have some of those kind of mesa type things. This one, I'm just going to do whatever kind of calls to me. I'm going to make a couple mountain shapes because we are starting to run out of time, so I do need to kind of wrap this up a little bit. So I do apologize. I am going to be speeding up. I want to make sure I finish all these, but I do have to be mindful of the time today. Now this one is not fully dry yet. It is still a little bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my hair dryer and I'm going to dry this, and I'm also going to dry this one right here so that we can do some more stuff. Actually, I'm going to dry all of these just to give everything a really good dry so we have a second layer. If you're sensitive to noise, now is a good time to go ahead and just turn the volume down for about 20 to 30 seconds. The TikTok does a pretty good job apparently of actually kind of reducing this noise, but it can be noisy, so I know some people are sensitive to it. So I'm going to give you a countdown in 3, 2, and 1. All right, everything should be nice and dry now, so I'm going to be able to do my first layer of mountains on this one. I'm thinking I want to do kind of off to one side, so let's start lower and let's go higher. Now, sometimes when you use the heat gun, the paper is going to be hot, so it's going to want to kind of dry on you as you go. That's what was happening at the top there, so I just added a little bit more. A hairdryer works great too. Okay, so I used the same color of mountains on all 4 of these paintings for our first layer. And look how different the color looks depending on what we're layering it over. And that's one of the things that I just love about watercolor, is that it allows us to do that. All right, so this one, I'm actually going to leave this one as is. We're trying to work with a limited palette, so I think we're going to bring in, we're going to cheat though, and we're going to bring in a a pen or something to make our trees on this one. And on this one, what am I doing here? Okay, this one I think I'm going to do one more layer of mountains, but notice that I kind of made a little thing here. That's going to be it could be a road, it could be a river, or whatever you want it to be, but we want it to be smaller where it's going to disappear at the horizon, and then it's going to get much bigger as it comes out. So I'm only going to do one more layer, and what I actually think I want to do is my next layer, I'm going to have the mountains kind of go here and then here, so that it kind of gives this a place for it to escape to. And since I'm just going to do one more, I'm just going to take my dark color on this one, and I'm just going to kind of carefully figure out where I'm going to place this second layer so that it gives this river that I'm going to be adding in a place to go. So that it actually has a little place where it's going in, and it's going to make a little bit of sense, at least visually, kind of why we've placed this here. It doesn't have to make a ton of sense. It could just go off and we just can't see it. All right, but this one I'm going to do at least 3 layers, I think. So this one I don't want to use that darkest color. What I want to do instead is take a spoonful of, or a brushful, it's not a spoonful, of this color and mix it in to my lighter color to darken it just a little bit. And then let's add a second layer of these mesas. Maybe this one is a little bit more stepped. And we've got a second layer of mesas there. Try not to overthink these too much because we're already working with different variables, so they don't need to be perfect. And then once again up here, I'm just going to add these. Now, you can bring this up over, but notice what happens is that you can actually see the other layer through it. So you do have to do like a little quick scrub to help soften the line behind it. Otherwise, you're going to be able to see that through, and it's going to get really kind of confusing visually as to which layer this layer of mountains belongs to. And then down here, is this one dry? I think it's dry. And do the same. Adding in another layer of mountains and stopping there. Okay. All right, we haven't touched this one for a little bit, so let's go in and add in another layer. We need some of that kind of orange color that we put in there. So I'm just going to take a tiny bit of, there's just a little bit of this on my palette. I'm just going to grab that. And I'm going to just make a couple little strokes in here. We're just going to vary the length of these, maybe even the thickness a little bit. We're just going to be adding in a couple little layers of those little strokes each time we come down the page and revisit it. All right, again, I'm going to take my hair dryer, or well, it's a heat gun technically, and I'm going to dry these for just a second. So if you are sensitive to noises, apparently it's not bad, but just in case, I'm going to start it in 3, 2, and 1. Alright, everything is nice and dry. Things are going to get a little interesting here. So we've got this a little river here. And I think the way I want to treat this is I want to wet where this river is. So remember, it's gonna be really small at the horizon, and then it's gonna get much larger as it comes towards you. I'm gonna get that whole thing wet here. And then I want to imagine where these banks are in this river. So the ones that I would be looking into along here is where we're going to see the most shadows. So I'm going to take some of this blue in my brush, put just a little in the tip, and while it's still wet, I'm going to drop that kind of along here. It's going to give me a little bit of that shadow. We could make this kind of into a blue-green type color, because a lot of times rivers are not a super blue color. So let's drop in a little bit of yellow here, and then we're going to compensate with more blue. I'm going to keep this as simple as I can, just because again, we're trying to do these kind of quick little studies. And then let's drop a little bit more of that darker color along the edge here. Once we add in kind of more of the foreground elements, this is going to make a little more sense as well. But I'm going to just kind of try to keep this simple to just kind of allude to, hey, look, it's a river. But I'm going to let that dry for a bit before I do anything else. So in the meantime, I'm going to wash my brush. I'm going to take dry my brush off, take another scoop of our dark color and mix it into our lighter color. And we're going to add in more of these mesas. Kind of thinking this is going to be my last layer of these mesas, and I'm just going to kind of plop it off here and then not add in one here. I'll drop it off there. Remember, when I'm painting these, this is just kind of, I'm going by what my gut is telling me. And if your gut tells you something different, you should do something different. But that is kind of a really nice way, easy, simple way to do kind of a desert type scene here. We're going to add in another layer of mountains here. And one more down here. Ooh, I actually want that to be a little darker. Let's just take care of that now. Okay. Also, we're going to come over here and we're going to take some, ooh, we did take away all of our kind of blue that we were using before for that sky. So I'm just going to take some of this blue and mix it in to get that more muted color. And I'm going to be doing the color that's here, but down over here, because that's kind of where it would be reflecting in the water. I'm using light brush strokes. And sometimes I also like to throw a little bit of this right along the horizon line, just to give it a little definition. You don't have to do that part if you don't want to. Okay. So while these are drying, we're going to start to tackle this, and we're also going to start on this. This is nice and dry. Now we're going to actually talk about pens for a second, because we're going to draw some. We could add some stars by sprinkling some metallics and things like that, but we're trying to work with this limited color palette, so I'm not going to do that now, and I'm just going to add some trees to this. We could paint these on. However, this is already a pretty dark color, and it's really hard to get a full saturation of black with watercolor, so instead I'm actually just going to skip over to pen. Now, pen is really interesting in watercolor. Something like this, which is water and fade resistant, you can paint on top of after you let it fully dry. Something like this is just a felt tip pen. It is not waterproof, so you cannot paint on top of it. But that doesn't mean you can't use it in your paintings, because I can actually put this on top of this because it's dry and I'm not going to paint over it. and this is actually usually the one I like to use. So, or just a Papermate felt tip pen. So I'm going to draw some trees in this one, and all I'm going to do for these trees is I'm going to make a line. Let's see if I can get you closer to this. I'm going to tap at the top for those couple little boughs. These are evergreen trees. And then I'm just going to start to scribble, getting wider as I go down. Just like that. I'm going to add in a couple more. Let's do one over here. Maybe it is kind of going off the page. Usually I like to do these ones with pretty thick trees, but I think I'm going to stick to doing 3 trees on this one just because we're 2.5 technically, just because of our time. So I want to be able to see all these, the end results when we take off the tape for you guys. But normally I would do these a little bit thicker. I'd probably add in quite a few more trees at the bottom of this. Okay. All right, so I think this is going to be dry enough here to actually do some stuff in the foreground. So I think I want to just do some like grassy type colors in the foreground. We are going to have to mix up our greens because, actually, oh, we haven't barely touched this. So maybe we're going to do some grassy greens, but also we're going to touch some of this brown color because that was one of the colors we were supposed to use, and I have apparently just totally avoided it. As a matter of fact, I kind of forgot that we were even using it. All right, putting some blue here. I'm going to wash my brush. And let's grab some of this yellow and mix this in. So we've got a nice green color. I'm going to wet that. And then we're just going to start to place this in the foreground. And then I'm going to drop in some of that green. This is not going to be perfect for sure, but that's okay. It already looks kind of neat, but we're not going for perfection. We're going for practice. I'm just going to drop in some of this green kind of along here in a couple areas. And while everything's still wet, so it'll just kind of all flow together. And just add some texture. Maybe even drop in a little more of this in a couple areas. There, that's not bad. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. All right, that one's done. That one's done. Or actually, let's add a final layer to this one with that dark color, because this layer I feel like just got a little bit lost. So let's take a dark color. I like to think of mountains as being able to hide or to highlight things. So let's use them to do that. There, now we just have a little peekaboo layer in between those. That was probably a little bit too dark to go to, but hey, we're going with the flow here. I also want to add in a little more yellow to this just to give it a little more pop. So I'm going to take some of this color and let's put some more of that in. Being a little more aggressive with the strokes, not too much, but a little bit more. And then this one, we're going to try to do one of my favorite things, and I don't know if this is going to work super well on this paper or not, but we're going to try to create some blooms. So similar to what we did up here, we're just going to take a bunch of that green and yellow and that brown color, maybe even a little blue. We're just going to place this all along the foreground. You do want your mountains to be pretty much dry before you start doing this, so if you need to, dry yours. So I'm just putting these colors in here. Just getting some variation. Maybe even putting a little, I'm going to put a little blue to add a little darker color in a couple areas. Then I'm going to let this soak in for just a second. I'm going to wash my brush off so that I have, and tap it off so I have just a little bit of water in there. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to drop in tiny amounts of water, and it's going to start to push away those pigments just a little bit. These are called blooms when you do this, and it's going to create some interesting textures. It can kind of sometimes look like little bushes and things. I want to mess with this one more, but I am already over time, so I am going to have to kind of wrap this up. So I'm going to leave this here, and you can kind of, I want you to see the potential of what you could do with something like this in the foreground for creating like bushy or grassy type textures by dropping a little water in to a bunch of different colors. All right, let's take the time though to take off the tape. And I know Mary already mentioned this in the comments, but I'm not going to do it just because I'm gonna play in the dangerous mode, and I'm just going to take my tape off. But if I want to make sure that my tape is not going to tear my paper, and I'm like really concerned about it, what I will do is a couple things, and I will still be doing one of these things, but the first thing is I heat it up. When you heat it up, it releases that adhesive a little bit, and you can take it off easier. The second thing we want to do is, let me show you what not to do first. And this is going to be fine, I think. But we don't want to pull it at a 90-degree angle because it's going to grab the edge there and then pull it. So instead, when we're taking our tape off, we want to take it off at an angle like this. That's going to remove it softer. So I'm just going to take this, let's move these so they don't knock around so much. So let's take off our tape and let's see what we've created. And also, when we use a ton of water here, usually I will just sit and let these just dry on their own, because some of that's going to go in between the layers of that tape. It's probably going to get on my paper as I take this off. It's not a big deal because these are practices, but usually when I'm using lots of water and lots of color, I will just let these sit so that that doesn't happen. But today, I'm not going to. This is my favorite one. I think this might be my favorite one. I do actually really like that. And while I'm taking this off, I would love to know how many of you did these along, and how are you doing, and which ones are your favorites? Or did you go off book and do something completely different, like combining a couple of these variables in a different set of ways? I do like the mesas too. Actually, I really like all of the ones that we made. These are, I need to do these ones more often. These are my favorite types of the classes to actually teach, because I feel like we learn so many different things. We get to paint so many different things, and then at the very end we have all these cute little ones. And since we paint a bunch of them, like if a couple of yours don't turn out, you always still have at least one or two where you're like, hold on a second. Okay, got all my tape off. Let's organize these into a little collection that we can see all of them. Let's see if I can get them all to be on screen. There we go. Oh, this one is definitely, these two are my favorites. I do like this one too. I kind of like all of them, but I think these three here are my favorite ones. If you're brand new to watercolor and you followed along with this or took notes or want to watch this on replay, this is going to give you a huge leg up in actually learning different things, because we talked about wet on wet, we talked about wet on dry, we did a little bit of shading here, we talked about layering, and we even touched into blooms and things. So the next couple classes that you look at or videos, even if they're not mine, you're going to be like, hold on a second. I recognize this. I'm not totally in the dark. So I will be posting this as long as it does save. And the good news is I did double check. For those of you who didn't hear this at the beginning, I did just post both 2 weeks ago's class and the peonies from earlier this summer. Originally, TikTok wasn't letting me download that one, and I was able to. So even if we don't get this one right away, if TikTok's being difficult or I'm not able to download it or I forget, there's a good chance it'll be up later as well. If you want to, the best way to share pictures, which I love seeing pictures, is to like make an Instagram post and tag me. I think I'm getting kind of inundated with messages and things, so they do get kind of lost amongst that. So that's the best way to do that, or post it to your story. Love seeing them so much, and I hope that everybody has a really good day. I hope you had fun doing this, and I've got to sign off. So we'll be back in about 2 weeks. Thank you everyone for joining.